And thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel on high alert after a series of rocket attacks. We'll have details. Plus, religion in America's future. Many Americans no longer belong to a church.
People used to go to church because that was the thing you did if you're a good person, and now they don't anymore.
See how churches can reverse this growing trend. Then later, we sit down with Fox host Shannon Bream. She talks to us about her faith career and her latest book, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak.
I found that in writing the last two books, we focused on women a lot, but there are always men in the stories too. And some of these we thought were really beautiful stories about romance and what God says about marriage. And all of these things that he designed, and maybe Christians sometimes are uncomfortable talking about, the sex, the romance, the dating.
All these stories and more coming up next from the CBN Newsroom.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin this half hour in Israel, putting its forces on high alert after days of taking rocket fire from Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, and for the first time, Syria. As Chris Mitchell reports now from Jerusalem, Israel is fighting on multiple fronts, and many experts are pointing at Iran as the source of the escalation.
More than 30 rockets were fired from Lebanon into northern Israel, and at least 6 from Syria. After the rocket attacks from the north and south, Israel hit targets inside the Gaza Strip, Lebanon, and Syria. Many believe Iran is leading this push from behind the scenes.
Just last week, we saw the heads of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, sitting together with the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, in Beirut, behind pictures of the imams that lead the Islamic Republic, Khamenei and Khomeini before that. So there's no doubt that it's Iran that is trying on every single front to attack the state of Israel.
Trayman believes Iran is now sensing weakness inside Israel.
The Iranians are looking at what's going on in Israel today, and this includes the debate and the protests over judicial reform, the challenges to the current governing coalition, and are recognizing that this might be a prime time to test the strength and resolve of Israelis here in Israel and to stage attacks.
In an apparent move toward Iran's meddling, the U.S. Navy is deploying a guided missile submarine capable of carrying up to 154 Tomahawk missiles to the region. It released pictures of the submarine crossing the Suez Canal on Friday. Israel is also reeling from terror attacks inside its border. This ramming attack on the Tel Aviv promenade wounded several and killed this 35-year-old lawyer from Italy. Family and friends mourn 2 sisters after a Palestinian terrorist murdered them in a shooting attack on Friday in the northern Jordan Valley. Their mother, also shot in the attack, is in serious condition. The flashpoint came last Tuesday night when Muslim men barricaded themselves in the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. Israel police negotiated with them to leave, but they refused. When the police entered the mosque, the men set off fireworks and threw stones in retaliation, and video spread throughout the Muslim world, providing the pretext to attack Israel. The escalating tension here comes as Muslims are celebrating Ramadan on the Temple Mount. Jews observe Passover with the Kohanim blessing at the Western Wall, and Christians gather at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and Garden Tomb to celebrate Christ's resurrection. It's rare to have all these holidays fall at the same time. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The Biden administration is promising to fight the ruling of a Texas federal judge suspending the FDA's approval of the abortion pill. The pill, known as Mifepristone, is used in what are called medication abortions, which now actually account for more than half of abortions in the United States. As Dale Hurd reports, the judge's decision, along with another ruling in favor of the pill, is setting off a major legal battle.
The order from U.S. District Judge Matthew Kazmarek suspending use of the abortion pill would apply to all 50 states, including those where abortion is currently legal. But the case is most certainly headed to the Supreme Court. Alliance Defending Freedom, which filed the lawsuit, says it's hopeful but knows the legal process is not over.
We're happy to obtain that preliminary ruling from the district court, but we know obviously this is not the last stage and the last word on this issue, and we're ready to go to the next stage.
Well, it was certainly a victory. It was one that we've been praying for some time.
The Justice Department immediately filed an appeal, and Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra says the White House will use every option to reverse the ban.
This is not America. What you saw by that one judge in that one court in that one state, that's not America.
New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says the Biden administration should ignore the judge's ruling.
What they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts.
At the same time as the decision suspending the pill, another federal judge in Washington state ruled the opposite, saying the pill must remain available. This week, the focus will turn to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, where the Justice Department will seek a stay allowing Mifepristone to remain in use until the Supreme Court issues its expected ruling. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Russia is threatening military and other measures in response to Finland's joining NATO last week. Vladimir Putin is nervous because it ends Finland's era of military non-alignment and doubles the length of NATO's shared border with Russia. Chuck Holton reports now from Helsinki.
The 31st flag is being raised in front of NATO headquarters in Brussels to celebrate Finland officially becoming the newest member of NATO. As a result, NATO nations now stretch 800 miles along Russia's border, double its previous length. It also means the NATO alliance has more than 60% of the world's combined military power.
This is truly a historic day because very shortly, as the Secretary General said, we will be welcoming Finland into the alliance to its seat at the table. And I'm tempted to say this is maybe the one thing we can thank Mr. Putin for, because he once again here has precipitated something he claims to want to prevent by Russia's aggression, causing many countries to believe that they have to do more to look out for their own defense and to make sure that they could deter possible Russian aggression going forward.
This military museum in Helsinki details the storied history of the Finnish military. They've really been legendary, especially throughout the 20th century, as they've fought off superior numbers, mostly Soviets, with fewer men, fewer guns, and done so very successfully. That's one of the reasons why NATO leaders want the Finns and the Swedish to join their organization, and they failed to get them to do so for many years because they had a policy of military neutrality. However, what NATO leaders failed at for years, Vladimir Putin succeeded at in days.
While Finland's active military is small, it's very well equipped. Finland's artillery capacity exceeds Poland, Germany, Norway, and Sweden combined. Its forces have also been training alongside U.S. troops for years.
Well, as the situation in Europe has changed quite much over the last year, I think it gives Finland a new opportunity for better safety in the future. So we have been, for a long time, we've been relying on our independence and neutrality, and now we just realize that that's not the path of the future.
It's better than nothing, you know. If we are alone, it's no chance in this situation.
As the world waits to see how Putin responds to this new move, part of the Kremlin's consideration could focus on Finland's reserve corps of more than 900,000 citizen soldiers standing ready to deter any further Russian aggression. Chuck Holton, CBN News, Helsinki.
Coming up, we organize religion. For the first time in history, a majority of Americans are not going to church. Find out how some pastors are coming up with new ways to pack their pews when we come back. Most Americans no longer belong to a church. In 2019 alone, 4,500 churches closed. But then COVID compounded the issue. Our John Jessup reports on how churches can adapt to reverse this downward trend for future generations.
For 2 weeks, thousands flocked to Asbury University, the Kentucky campus that kicked off a spiritual awakening across the country. That movement also comes during a time of decline for America's churches. Stroll down a busy street in Washington, D.C. like this one with empty storefronts, and there's no denying signs of a slowdown. If it's a struggle for businesses to survive these challenging times, imagine how much harder it is for houses of worship.
People used to go to church because that was the thing you did if you're a good person. and now they don't anymore.
That cultural shift, spurred by changing demographics, reflects a new religious landscape where over the last 20 years, the majority of Americans no longer belong to a church, and weekly attendance dropped from 137 people to just 65 faithful filling the pews. It's a phenomenon journalist Bob Smetana examines in his book, Reorganized Religion, painting a picture of how we arrived here and offering potential paths forward.
Churches were built for a different world than we're in now, and it doesn't mean you have to change your beliefs. It does mean you have to say, okay, how do we adapt in this world?
4,500 churches closed in 2019, the heartbreaking result of fewer people filling the pews. Smetana writes, it can be easy for churches closing their doors to blame themselves when, in reality, a number of factors fuel the trend.
When a church declines, sometimes the people think, this is my fault. If I'd had a better pastor, if we had different music, even if you'd done everything perfectly, this kind of decline would happen because these kind of demographic forces.
COVID only made matters worse, with many congregations still trying to make up for fallen attendance and giving. Studies show church attendance has emotional, relational, and public health benefits. To this veteran religion reporter, church closures reinforce they're not only a loss for people of faith, but society at large.
Churches do a whole lot of great things in the culture, and they do charities, they do disaster relief, and those things will disappear as congregations disappear.
Smetana provides examples of various church bodies making unexpected choices.
And today, I'm excited to announce that Hill City Church and Capital City Christian Church are merging together.
After much prayer, Living Hope Valentine Evergreen is merging with Mosaic to become one Mosaic church.
We thank God for the unity He has created so far, and we're praying that it continues.
A difficult circumstance forcing some congregations to reimagine their call to serve communities in change, and in some cases, taking a step of faith rather than walking away.
Instead of saying you could come join our church, they said, what if we join their church? So they have a continued ministry because this church said there's something bigger than just us and our survival.
Got to remember, the church are the people of God. The buildings are buildings.
When considering an uncertain future, Tennessee pastor Robert Ray says it's important to pray and to be open to God's call.
You got to listen to God in all this. Is this what God is calling you? And look at the reality. I mean, churches close all the time throughout Christian history. I mean, can we find some of the churches, St. Paul founded in Eastern Europe and Rome? And, can you find the exact congregation, that has that linked heritage? And I don't think you can.
Pastor Ray speaks from experience.
The fact is, he had 12 people in that church today. Jesus had 12 people. He done all right, didn't he?
He leads a congregation that once faced the prospect of closing until a lifeline appeared on their doorstep.
And a bunch of refugees show up. And that group of people showed up, saved that church. It wasn't the future they thought they'd have, but it's a future that was possible because even in difficult times, they kept going.
The story of how refugees from Burma found a home and breathed new life into All Saints Church was portrayed in a 2017 film by the same name.
You do not have an All Saints without faith. You do not have an All Saints without Jesus Christ. Human willing would not have been enough.
The small-town congregation had to adapt, learning each other's customs, culture, and language. More than 15 years later, the doors are still open, now even wider, sharing space with another smaller church.
I'm blessed, because not many congregations our size has this type of demographic.
One idea Smetana weaves throughout the book is the theme of friendship, interconnecting pastors and churches with other congregations and leaders and the communities they serve. He stresses that as churches and people of faith continue in the long and rich history of the Christian church, they should also find ways to minister together here and now to build a brighter future for generations to come. John Jessup, CBN News, Washington.
Still ahead, we're sitting down with Fox host Shannon Bream. She's going to talk about the #1 love in her life, and she'll give us a sneak peek at her latest book, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Stay with us. Shannon Bream has been a familiar face on Fox News for about 16 years, and she recently got promoted to host of Fox News Sunday. She's also a best-selling author who begins her day reading the Bible and praying. CBN's Jenna Browder spoke with her about her faith, her new role at Fox, and her latest book.
At this point, she's a household name.
Part of this, they say, was because of the pandemic.
Shannon Bream, longtime Fox News anchor and correspondent. Plus, she loves Jesus.
How does faith inform your job here at Fox?
For me, it is the #1 thing in my life, so I hope that it's imbued in everything that I do.
That includes starting her day in the Word.
Reading, praying, journaling, I really enjoy as well. So that sets me up for the day. And if I'm in a hurry, if I oversleep, if I hit that snooze too many times and I miss that in the morning, I know it's going to be a more challenging day. But God goes with us as believers and walks us through those things. So for me to spend that time with him in the morning and lay that foundation is how I do everything else.
Shannon started at Fox News back in 2007. Since then, she's held many positions at the network, most recently being promoted to host of the highly esteemed Fox News Sunday.
It is an amazing show because it's one of these Sunday shows that puts down the marker for political discussions, and it has such a long tradition and history before I got here. So when I joined, there was already this excellent team of researchers and bookers and producers in place. So it's been a real privilege to walk into that and to say, okay, what new can we add, or additional twists, or how can we reach more viewers, younger people, different people who may not be as involved in these political conversations?
Is there an issue that you've, I guess, found most difficult to cover, or maybe most interesting to cover?
I think Ukraine's been really difficult. I think that Vladimir Putin, when he went in, thought a few days, I'll take what I want, Kyiv will fall, and I'll take what I want of Ukraine. Never seeing the resilience and the grit and the determination, underestimating that in the Ukrainian people. We've had journalists there repeatedly from day one. We lost 2 of our colleagues, and Ben Hall survived but suffered devastating injuries. He's been such an incredible inspiration to us and reminding us of why it's important that journalists stay on stories like that and stay there to talk about the people who their lives are torn apart.
You know, one issue that's really important to our viewers is religious freedom. And it seems like that's just an issue that keeps coming before the Supreme Court. I wonder if you might comment on that.
Absolutely does. And I think everybody who's in tune with that issue remembers a few years ago when the baker out of Colorado, Jack Phillips, had his case before the Supreme Court for a cake that he didn't want to do, a custom cake for same-sex wedding, although he said he was happy to serve LGBTQ couples and let them choose from what was in his store. But it got to this question of what do Christian business owners, what is their obligation in the stream of commerce with people with differing viewpoints? And the Supreme Court really didn't resolve all of the underlying issues in that case, so they're back at it now.
With 2 big cases, a Pennsylvania postman being forced to work on Sundays, and another involving a Colorado web designer.
This is written by Justice Gorsuch, deciding in favor of the coach.
As the network's chief legal correspondent, Shannon will be covering them all this spring. When she's not on the air, you can find Shannon writing, Finding the Bright Side, her first book and memoir, followed by bestsellers, The Women of the Bible Speak, The Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak, and her newest, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak.
I found that in writing the last 2 books, we focused on women a lot, but there are always men in the stories too. And some of these we thought were really beautiful stories about romance and what God says about marriage. And all of these things that he designed, and maybe Christians sometimes are uncomfortable talking about, the sex, the romance, the dating. But obviously God designed all of those relationships for us. And we thought there's so many beautiful ones, from Adam and Eve to Song of Solomon, that some people are hesitant to try to dig into that and actually figure out what that means to our marriages in our lives now.
Tell us a little bit about you and Sheldon.
So we've been married 27 years, and our favorite saying we say all the time is, like, we are not perfect, but we're perfect for each other. And we feel like we've made this lifelong commitment. And if you're married for more than 5 minutes, I say, you're going to have a dust up of some kind. But I think when you've made your vows before God and your family, and you have the support of your community, your Christian community, your church community, that will get you through a lot of rough waters.
Shannon admits they've had their ups and downs like everyone else, Sheldon being diagnosed with a brain tumor shortly after they got engaged, and Shannon having long dealt with a painful eye disease. Through it all, though, they've been there for each other.
He's my best friend, which I think is an added bonus to being in marriage. And I just think we really try hard to model what God has set out for us. Sheldon to love sacrificially, as Christ loved the church, me to respect him, and really to be each other's #1 cheerleaders.
In this latest book, Shannon writes about the greatest love of all, God's love for all of us. And yes, loving your neighbor.
And remember when Christ was discussing so many times in the New Testament about what are the greatest commandments. Yes, we're to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and spirit, but also to love your neighbor as yourself. And there aren't exceptions to that. We don't get to pick and choose.
You have this new book, new show. I don't know if you're quite thinking about it yet, but what's next for Shannon?
Oh my goodness,
Bream?
a nap. You know what? I just feel so grateful for every opportunity that's come my way. I'm working on a fiction book. It's something I've never tried before. I really enjoy great fiction. I admire so many of the writers who are out there, like Karen Kingsbury. Those who are no longer here, like Jane Austen. I'm a big fan of Fannie Flagg, and so not that I can measure up to what they do, but I would aspire maybe to. I think there are ways that you can share messages and encourage people through fictional stories as well. So maybe one day I'll get that done.
In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Stay with us. We have your Monday Motivation. It's coming up next. It's time now for your Monday Motivation. I want to leave you with this thought as we jumpstart a new week. If your situation is not good, rest easy in this truth. God is not done. He promises to work all things together for your good, and more importantly, it's always for His glory. So again, if it is not good, God is not done, it will be good again. With that word, I encourage you to make this a marvelous Monday, and be sure to have yourself a wonderful week. Do that with purpose and on purpose. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We hope you let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can, of course, always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We certainly welcome hearing from you. Again, I encourage you, make today a marvelous Monday. Join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, and God bless.